Shabbat shalom, everybody. For the most part, we as Jews, we really don't subscribe to the idea that God works in mysterious ways. For the most part, it's theologically problematic, and I think the human condition proves this. I think the other way to understand this, when Elijah the prophet was fleeing from Jezebel, when we learn from the Tanakh, we learn from the prophets that he was hiding in a mountain. And he heard the various sounds of nature, but finally what remained was that still small voice. And maybe that still small voice is God's whisper to us if we listen hard enough. So theologically, I like the idea that God can speak to us if we listen hard enough. Or sometimes when the Torah is giving you that empathic comfort that we desperately need during our times of difficulty. So if we look at the Torah hard enough, if we focus on its words and its meaning, maybe this is the comfort that we need. There are a few of us here tonight that are in mourning. When we say Shabbat Shalom and when we leave, you can identify them by the Kriya ribbon that is right above their heart. And for those that don't know the Kriya ritual, we learn two stories. One in the book of Genesis, when Jacob thought that Joseph had died, he tore his garments. And in the book of Samuel, before he becomes King David, when his father-in-law Saul dies, he too tore his garments. And this tear is symbolic. It's a void in our hearts that can never be filled. So for those here who are in mourning, I know who you are, and some members of this congregation know who you are too. Maybe we can believe in B'Sher, things are meant to be, but it's almost perfect that this Torah portion, Vayechi, is speaking directly to you to help you, to embrace you, to love you, that even in the pain of losing a loved one, God is catching your tears. It's Friday night and we don't read Torah, so I brought out my tikkun. It's what we use to learn how to cantillation, learn how to chant from the Torah. It's called a tikkun. It's a cantorial student's or rabbinic student's best friend that helps us guide us. Okay, this is what we use before we open the Torah. But for the most part, every time there's a new Torah portion, again, on this side, this is what the Torah would look like. There's a good break in the scroll. We can easily identify where the new parasha, where that is located. There's one major problem with Vayechi. Vayechi doesn't have a clean break. And for those who have to roll the Torah to find the parasha, it can be incredibly difficult. So Vayechi is located in the middle of the parasha, in the middle of the page. Starts right here. So again, we don't have a clean break. It's not a new paragraph, but it's right in the middle. So this puzzled our rabbis. So Rashi, I think, gives us our first good answer. He believes the reason why there isn't a clean break because it's setuma, it's closed. And he wants to talk about that this is the feeling that Jacob's children had right before Jacob died. Their heart was closing because they were losing their father. In Vayechi, as the last parsha in the book of Genesis, we begin with sadness. It's actually going to begin with the sadness of Jewish people because we know what happens next in Shemus, the book of Exodus. But this closed mark in the Torah, it talks about the suffering and despair that Jacob's sons had when their father is about to pass away. And for those who are here tonight, remembering a loved one, whether a yortzeit, a recent passing, we know that the past weeks of such uncertainty was no doubt a horrible time of your suffering. And if the Torah could empathize with the Jewish people, this is where we understand that even our patriarchs feel sadness, understand the human condition, and it's our job as Jews is to comfort the mourner. Rashi would go on later to talk about that this would also begin the spiritual exile of the Jewish people until they return back to Eretz Yisrael 400 years later. But here is the take-home, if there's any comfort that I can bring to the mourners here tonight. A midrash says that Vayechi, the closure of this, is not so much a separation, but it's a new beginning. And here's the flip, or the pivot, as I like to say. When God wrote the Torah through Moses, this was the separation, the closure, that Joseph and his children, the ones who pass away, now give the torch to Moses, the legacy that will endure. Because in Parashat Shemot, we begin the story of Moses. That is the separation. Losing a loved one, time does not heal in such a thing. A former mentor of mine taught me that it's like an ocean swell, a wave. Some days the waves are slow, they're little, and sometimes they're so big and it knocks you down. That's what happens when we lose a loved one. But the promise is through Moses, and so for the promise is through you, the legacy. It's to keep the stories alive, their memories alive, through you, through your children, through other family members. There's a reason why we don't have the perfect written word to comfort the mourner. That's why we are instructed not to say anything to the mourner until the mourner speaks directly to us. And though it's Shabbos and our mourners are exempt from mourning for this day, we as a Temple Emanu-El community feel your suffering. And on the other hand, we are here for you to ensure that your legacy endures forever. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.